Welcome to the Sustainable Dish Podcast. I'm Diana Rogers, a real food registered dietitian, author, and sustainability advocate. I co-host this podcast with James Connolly, who was a producer on my film, Sacred Cow. I also founded the Global Food Justice Alliance, an initiative advocating for the inclusion of animal-sourced foods like meat, dairy, and eggs for a more nutritious, sustainable, and equitable worldwide food system. You can check it out and join me at globalfoodjustice.org. Thanks again for listening, and now on to our show. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to let you know about the free Community Blood Sugar Challenge that I'm running for the month of February for my followers. You'll learn how to use a continuous glucose monitor, CGM, to find out how food impacts your individual body so that you can make the best choices when it comes to your diet. It was a complete game changer for me, and I recommend CGMs to all of my nutrition clients. I'm partnering with Levels to offer 2 free months when you sign up as a member to get the CGM without a prescription. Just need to visit sustainabledish.com/blood sugar, all one word, and enter your email to get the free ebook, access to the live Zoom calls, and the special offer from Levels. And if you're listening to this after our challenge has ended, you can still get access to my Blood Sugar Challenge ebook and the recorded Zoom calls, plus the special offer from Levels. Learning about how food impacts your blood sugar is valuable information that I think we all should know. Visit sustainabledish.com/blood sugar to sign up. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Today I have with me Storm Baynes-Ryan, and this is our fifth attempt to record a podcast. We've had some technical issues, but in this time I have gotten to know her, and she is lovely. What is going on in New Zealand right now is really something that I want all of you to listen to, because it's going to really impact a lot of farmers in New Zealand. It is based on some really huge misunderstandings about livestock and carbon cycles and the value that rural communities have to the country. So welcome, Storm. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so quickly for our audience, I learned about you from Instagram. What's your Instagram handle, by the way?
Oh, it's pretty basic. Storm LBR.
Storm LBR. Okay. I learned about you because you were standing on a very, very hilly part of your farm, which is the majority of your farm. And you were
Correct.
just showing how no other food production could possibly take place. Will you talk a little bit about your farm and what you raise and just the topography of your landscape?
Sure thing. So my husband and I have our first farm. My family's been farming for 100 years. I was born on a farm, but we've done this all ourselves, and we just purchased our first farm in May last year. We have 63 hectares of mainly steep hill country. So that means it's hills that you can't walk straight down. You have to zigzag. Some of it you can't even walk down. You have to scramble. And we have about 9 hectares of flats. I run sheep and beef specifically for finishing to send to the works.
And let's talk a little bit about this recent policy and how it's going to what are the real impacts that it's going to have. Talk about the basically what's going on.
So there is a policy which is still in the works. It's still being changed on a weekly basis. I believe it's based on very weak science. I believe the numbers that they're using are weak, and they haven't used any recent updated information, but it's specifically to decrease production on New Zealand farms. By decreasing production, theoretically, we will decrease the release of greenhouse gases, including the short-lived methane and the 6 to 10% of long-lived gases that theoretically New Zealand agriculture releases.
So the farmers are going to be taxed per kilo of meat.
Per kilo. So the theory is that we will say how much stock we have, how long we've had it for, what their weight was when they arrived, what their weight was when they left, how long they were on the farm, what grass they ate. Theoretically, very complex calculator. I don't think it's particularly accurate, but anyway. And then for each year, we will be taxed on how much theoretical greenhouse gas emissions we create on our farm based on a per kilo of carbon emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions. That will be how it works. We can sequester some by having fenced off areas of trees that are more than a hectare in size and that are managed with pest management. We can also use sheep. We can use some technology where there's sheep that have lower emissions, as well as a bolus for cattle. And we get a decrease in our fees as such, but neither of those are currently available.
So none of the grasslands, in theory, sequester any carbon. And
no, so in New Zealand, grass does not sequester carbon.
So you're defying basic biology in New Zealand only. So grasslands in other places can sequester carbon, but not in New Zealand.
True.
And and the trees have to be only pine trees.
So we can use native bush. You can use native bush, but it has to be fenced. And it has to be more than a hectare. Because if it's not a hectare, it doesn't sequester.
Right. Only stands of trees that are more than a hectare can sequester. Oh, and they have to be planted after what year?
Yeah, it gets too complex, but it's something to do with 1990 and the baseline. And then there's a thing called additionality, where although they may be sequestering, I don't know, let's just make up a number because I can't remember it. Let's say, I don't know, 3.5 tonne per hectare. You might only get 0.5 tonne per hectare because it's only sequestering an extra 0.5 since 1990.
Because that's supposed to be the baseline.
Because that's supposed to be the baseline.
Okay. And so what's the reality? Oh, you know what else I wanted to make sure that people understood is, can you describe your current ag practices? Like,
absolutely.
It's pretty much gold standard.
I would like to think so, but I certainly have a lot to learn still. I'm a very new farmer in the reality of running my own farm. What I try to do is I base my farming off the growth cycle of grass. So when the grass is fully grown, I put the stock in and I get them to eat it, and I put them on a space that I think that they'll eat within 2 days. Then I take them off that grass, put them into a new space that's similar in size in terms of how much grass there is, size of the animals, how many animals, a few things like that. Then I will move them on, and I will not put them back onto that grass, that first bit that is grazed, until it is regrown. And that might be 60 days, maybe even longer if it's a cold or wet or just miserable winter, which we just did have. And it might be between 12 and 18 days in the spring when the grass is growing really fast. My limiting factor, because my farm is so steep, is that I don't have enough fences to be able to do it perfectly, but I do it the best I can in terms of making sure that we are always rotating the animals around the farm and letting the grass regrow.
And that's not unusual.
No, most farmers I know are doing something really similar. The caveat to that is for animal health, when the ewes are about to lamb, they'll be left in a paddock. It'll be a bigger paddock. There'll be more space for each animal, but they won't be taken off when the grass is being chewed down, because the grass doesn't get chewed down because there's a bigger space, because we don't want to be moving ewes and lambs, or cows and calves, and some people, but specifically ewes and lambs. We don't want to be moving them when they have babies, because that just causes all sorts of problems with mismothering, lambs getting lost, lambs dying.
Right.
So, but that's just a very specific time period. The rest of the time, most farmers that I know and all farmers that I respect are on a rotational grazing program.
And Will you talk about how this is going to impact the farmers that you know?
So it's all very theoretical because we don't know, but it's likely to decrease profitability by about 20% across the board. And for our excellent farmers, that will probably be 5 to 10%. But for our farmers that are struggling, for those that have high interest rates, massive mortgages, have been impacted by huge weather events such as the rain. We've had a couple this year, some floods, where a friend had 100 hectares of slip just come down, where fences have been taken out and where all those costs are building up. Taking that much off their profit, which will be more like 30 or 40% off their profit, it will wipe them out. For people like me that are just starting out, it's going to make a big difference to whether I can make it or not. It's going to shut down things like schools, rural communities. It takes away some of the richness of the things, of the men that have been breeding dogs for years and years and training cattle dogs, for the amazing station horses, which just do the most astonishing things, that are bred on these farms. They will be gone. Because if we can't have the farms, we don't have those. We don't have rural people who can think outside of the box. We don't have people. They're the ones that get into the working bees and create these amazing things. Like going to a working bee for a show is likely to be people who are rural. And so if we take away these people, we take away a huge richness in our society, and we bring everybody and just compress them into town. And for me, it would just break me. I'm not suited for town life.
Do you often suffer from headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, or sleeplessness? It could be from an electrolyte deficiency. Drinking plain water may not be enough to replenish lost electrolytes, which is especially important for athletes, kids, breastfeeding moms, those who are on a low-carb diet, and it can help regulate appetite. Element was created by my co-author and good friend Rob Wolf, and is free of artificial ingredients, food coloring, gluten, fillers, and sugar. To put it simply, Element is a drink mix that has everything you need and nothing you don't. Even US Olympic athletes rely on Element, and I personally recommend it to everyone in my nutrition practice. I love the raspberry and citrus flavors, and when you buy via my link, you'll get a free sample pack of a variety of flavors for you to try. Plus, they have a convenient subscription program that makes it easy for you to keep your favorite flavors fully supplied. Head over to sustainabledish.com/LMNT to give it a try. That's sustainabledish.com/LMNT. It's really unfortunate that people who are so disconnected from farming and rural life are making such impactful policy decisions that are going to absolutely destroy the way of life for so many people. There's this idea that I talked about a little bit with James Connolly, my co-producer, called long-termism, and how we were discussing how wrong it is to be so overly concerned with these ideas of how people might live in 1,000 years from now and colonizing Mars and um, all of these big ideas, while simultaneously neglecting the people who right now need nourishment, need livelihoods. Um, there are massive nutrient deficiencies worldwide. That's not going to go away. Those nutrient deficiencies are largely best met with animal source foods like beef and lamb. And, not to mention how silly it is that it needs to be, a hectare of pine trees, fenced off, so no grazing inside the trees, which is a practice that can actually increase biodiversity. Talk a little bit about the the person from IKEA that's buying the land?
Yeah. So there is a beautiful farm. I think it is 5,000 hectares, and there's another farm next to it. Um, if it was in the centre of New Zealand, it would be a dairy farm. It is stunning. It is productive. Now, the New Zealand government says that we are not planting productive farmland and trees, and that's an absolute load of rubbish. There's a man, the man who owns IKEA has bought these farms, and he, as far as I understand it, is turning it into productive forest. So it's plantation forest where the trees will be planted, the trees will be pruned and thinned, and then in 25 years they will be milled and theoretically used for IKEA furniture.
And that's somehow better for the environment than what you're doing.
Apparently, he's allowed to continue with, he's bought it as a carbon offset. So apparently, businesses that pollute are allowed to continue to pollute without decreasing their pollution as long as they plant trees on productive farmland. I can't make it make sense. I don't know about you.
Right. And he's not even a New Zealander.
No, he's not a New Zealander. So if you own a farm, if you're someone from overseas who owns a farm in New Zealand, as far as I understand it, you need to spend about 6 months of the year in New Zealand. I don't know if you have to be on your farm, but that's what you have to do. If you own a forest in New Zealand, you never, ever have to come.
Wow. This is absolutely mind-blowing to me that the New Zealand farmers are going to suffer. Demand for meat worldwide is not going to go down. It just means that New Zealand farmers are not going to get their share of the business, and it's just going to go to some other country where the farming practices are undoubtedly not as nature positive as New Zealand's practices, because it is definitely, as a country, the best that I've seen as far as grazing practices. I think it's really sad that people are going to have to go to the grocery store and buy meat from somewhere else to somehow reduce their carbon footprint.
I can't get my head around it. One of the people I spoke to about policy seemed really adamant that this was the best and only way forward. But I feel like it's not, it just can't be. And that's also not to say that we can't improve what we're doing in New Zealand, because there are always ways to improve. And that's not to say that we are perfect or that there are no emissions, but there must be a better way so that we don't decrease our production, thus that other countries have to pick up the slack to create enough meat for people to eat, which would increase global emissions. And from what I understand, we need to be looking at emissions as a global thing rather than New Zealand doing an awesome job of decreasing our emissions by 20%, which is 0.002, I believe, of world global emissions. This is what we would decrease in our long-term gases. But it would, by decreasing the world emissions by that much, it would decimate rural New Zealand. I just don't understand it. And there has to be a better way. And I believe that if we have emissions, then we have a responsibility to mitigate them and to pay for them if that's what needs to be done. We need to do something, absolutely, and I'm not going to argue that, but it has to be better.
Yeah, here in the US, there are some dairy farmers that are doing really great work with converting some of the methane to fuel by covering manure lagoons and all that kind of stuff. But by and large, the meat farmers in New Zealand that are pasture based, that's not that's that's nothing like these large dairy farms with huge manure lagoons. So you don't have a manure lagoon. You're
No,
not creating
no,
an imbalance of gases on your farm.
No, and with the obviously as with the way that we manage our pasture, we try and get all that manure into one spot, and then we let it break down in that spot, and we get it to move along. And all our water comes from rain. We don't irrigate. Some farms do in New Zealand, and that's how they make it work. But we're basically rainwater. If it doesn't rain, we've got no water.
Right. Well, we're going to keep following this. I'm going to see if there might be an opportunity for me to hop over to New Zealand in April when I'm there, down in Sydney. And I'll continue to be watching this. Please keep me updated through Instagram with your updates.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll link to your Instagram handle and that one video showing your farm in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, sure. I really don't know. I feel like I'm a very new farmer. I'm a middle-aged mother of 4, and I'm just heartbroken that these laws could be coming in without us being able to really make it legitimate and use the proper science.
Yeah. It's really heartbreaking. I'm seeing policies like this. I'm seeing active farmland being taken out, especially around the UK, in particular. We see what's happening right now in the Netherlands. There's some really crazy policy happening there too, and harming farmers.
It's really frightening.
So, well, thank you for your time. I know this is a little bit shorter of a podcast for most of my listeners, but we again had some technical issues and just trying to squeeze this in. So thank you again, Storm, for all of your time.
You're welcome, Diane.
All right.
Yeah, there is one more thing I actually did want to say, if you've got a second. Is I was speaking to a friend who runs a mental health organisation locally, and she said that in the recent months, she has men who, in New Zealand, men don't talk about their feelings, just to let you know. She's had a massive uptick in men coming to see her because they are so stressed about the changes that are being put upon them by the government and the lack of knowing, because this policy is a bit fluffy. And if the mental health of men is suffering, then what about everybody else? And that's the other thing that I think that people aren't paying attention to when we're looking at all the social things, that mental health is also something that we really need to pay attention to. We need to make sure that everybody is feeling okay and feeling sure of themselves in this policy. Nobody feels certain.
Yeah, I mean, rural communities are so critically important and often forgotten, especially today when everything has just gotten so polarized and people have this carbon tunnel vision without really thinking about the unintended consequences of what this really means for the citizens of their country. So, well, thanks again for being here. And I wish you the best with all of this.
Thank you very much, Diana. Well, it will all work out in the end. I am certain of it, but we just need to keep talking.
Thanks so much for listening to the Sustainable Dish podcast. If you like the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you'd like to support the work I'm doing on Patreon, please visit sustainabledish.com/join. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll get access to ad-free podcasts, plus exclusive video podcasts, never-before-seen interviews, and a discussion community. Go to sustainabledish.com/join, and thank you for your support.